My name is Caroline, and 5 years ago, my parents handed me a compass, smiled, and then left me and my 10-year-old daughter to die in the middle of the forest. No phones, no car, just a note that said, "This is for the best." What they didn't know is we survived, and we're about to tell the world exactly what they did. Her name is Lily. She's 10 years old, and she's my whole world. And if you had told me 2 weeks ago that my own flesh and blood would try to leave us for dead in the middle of the wilderness just to teach me a lesson, I would have laughed it off as dramatic. But that was before I stood in a silent clearing clutching a crumpled note in my shaking hand, one that read in my father's handwriting, "This is for the best. Trust me." Let me back up. It started like something out of a Norman Rockwell painting. My dad, Stephen, called me out of the blue on a Wednesday morning and suggested we go on a last hurrah family camping trip before Lily and I moved to Denver. I'd recently accepted a teaching position at a charter school there, double my salary, more benefits, and a shot at the future I'd been clawing toward for years. My parents weren't thrilled. Scratch that, they were livid. "You're running again," Mom had snapped when I told her. "You'll uproot that poor child's life just to chase some fantasy in the mountains." But this camping trip, it sounded like a peace offering. One final memory before we left. Dad even said he'd handle everything: the permits, the gear, the transportation. "Just bring yourselves," he told me, his voice softer than I'd heard it in months. "Let's make a memory before you go chasing the wind." I should have known better. But I wanted so badly to believe that maybe, just maybe, my parents were finally coming around, that they'd accept my decision, that Lily could have a good memory of her grandparents before we left for good. We drove out early Saturday morning. It was me, Lily, my parents, my older brother Aaron, his wife Michelle, and their son Zach, the usual suspects. We took 2 cars and drove nearly 4 hours north into the edge of Shiloh National Forest. No cell signal, no nearby campsites, just us and the trees. It was beautiful, I'll give them that. Tall pines surrounded a clearing near a crystal-clear lake. The air smelled like cedar and something wild. Lily was buzzing with excitement, running ahead with Zach and skipping stones in the water while Aaron pitched tents like a pro. That first night, we roasted marshmallows over a campfire. The air was cool, the stars were out, and Lily was laughing harder than I'd seen in weeks. For a brief moment, I thought maybe I was wrong. Maybe this really was just a family trip. Maybe they were trying, but even then, something was off. My mother kept saying strange things. "Lily's going to miss this place more than she knows." And Aaron barely looked at me all evening. He was glued to Dad's side, whispering whenever they thought I wasn't paying attention. There was a tension under the smiles, the kind you feel but can't name yet. The next morning, Dad suggested I take Lily on a short hike to see a nearby waterfall. "It's not too far," he said. "Just an hour or so. Might be your last chance to see something this peaceful." His voice held a note I couldn't quite place. Still, Lily's eyes lit up, and I didn't want to disappoint her. So we went. It was beautiful. The falls were tall and loud, the spray cool on our faces. We took pictures, dipped our toes in, the water laughed. It was one of those rare moments where everything felt okay, until we came back. The campsite was empty. No tents, no cars, no campfire smoke, nothing but silence and a single plastic bin sitting on a folding table. I remember Lily's small voice beside me, barely more than a whisper. "Mom, where did everyone go?" My heart dropped. I walked to the bin and lifted the lid. Inside, a 2-person tent, a flashlight, a couple of water bottles, a half-used first aid kit, and some packaged snacks. Sitting on top was a folded piece of paper. I opened it with trembling hands. "This is for the best, trust me, Dad." And just like that, the illusion shattered. I stood there frozen, that note burning in my fingers like it was made of fire. My mind couldn't make sense of it at first. It had to be a joke, right? A sick, twisted prank. But then I looked around. really looked and saw the truth settle in like a thundercloud rolling over the mountains. They were gone. Everything that wasn't ours was gone. No extra tents, no fishing gear, no coolers, no camp chairs, no cars. The fire pit had been extinguished, the ground cleared. Even their footprints were faint, as if they'd tried to hide the fact they were ever here. I turned to Lily, who was gripping her little purple backpack like a lifeline. Her face was pale. "Is this a game?" she asked quietly. I crouched down in front of her, trying to keep my voice steady. "No, baby, it's not a game." She blinked hard, like she was trying not to cry. Then why did they leave us? It was the one question I didn't have an answer for. I hugged her tightly, forcing my own panic down. I needed to think. Fast. I opened the bin again and took stock. 2 granola bars, a half-empty bottle of water, a flashlight with 1 spare battery, a flimsy 2-person tent, a single box of waterproof matches. No map, no phone, no means of communication. And we were miles from civilization with no marked trail back. It wasn't an accident. That much was clear. And that's when I saw it, a second envelope tucked beneath the tent roll. This one had my name on it, just Caroline in my mother's neat cursive. I opened it with shaking hands and read, "You've always done things your own way. And look where it's gotten you. We're tired of watching you make the same selfish choices over and over again. You need to learn responsibility, Caroline. You need to stop running and face the consequences of your actions. This is a chance to grow. You're not alone. You have your daughter. Make it work. We'll come back when you've had time to reflect." There was no signature, but I didn't need one. This wasn't just abandonment. This was punishment. A planned, deliberate lesson they thought would humble me. But they didn't count on one thing. I wasn't the same woman they thought I was. I had changed. I had worked hard. I'd fought through the worst moments of my life to give my daughter a future they never believed in. And I was not about to let their twisted idea of help destroy what I'd built. I grabbed the bin and dumped everything onto the dirt. "Let's set up the tent," I told Lily. "We need shelter before dark." She nodded, her face stoic but scared. I handed her the flashlight. "You're my second in command. We're gonna figure this out." The tent was barely functional. Cheap, thin nylon with a zipper that stuck. I had to use rocks to pin it down because there were no stakes. Lily helped the best she could, holding the corners while I tried to snap the poles into place. We had about 3 hours of daylight left. I rationed the water immediately, just a few sips for each of us, and gave Lily half a granola bar. It wasn't enough, but it was something. Once the tent was up, I told her we needed to prepare for nightfall. I found some dry leaves and sticks, built a small fire circle, and prayed those matches still sparked. After 3 failed tries, the flame finally caught. I felt something flicker in me too. Resolve maybe. Or desperation. Maybe both. Lily sat close to me, clutching her knees. "Are they coming back?" she asked. I stared into the fire. "I don't know," I admitted. "But we're not going to wait for them." She looked up at me, her eyes wide. "Then what do we do?" I took a breath, reached for my backpack, and pulled out a small spiral notebook I always carried. "We make a plan." I tore out the first page and wrote in big capital letters, "Survival priorities. Shelter done. Fire done. Water. Food. Figure out how to get help." I held it up to show her. "This is our mission, okay? Like those shows we used to watch with Dad. We're going to survive this. Together." Lily gave me a small, shaky smile. "Like survival partners." "Exactly," I said. "You and me, Team Blake." That night, we curled into the paper-thin tent under a sky full of stars that felt colder than ever. Every sound outside sent my heart racing: the crack of a branch, the whistle of wind, the distant howl that could have been a coyote or something worse. But Lily was next to me, breathing, safe. And for now, that was enough. The morning after that first terrifying night came with a sharp chill in the air and the aching realization that this wasn't just a bad dream. I woke up stiff, every muscle sore from tension, and the hard ground beneath us. Lily was still curled up beside me, her little arm draped across her stuffed bunny, the one she'd insisted on bringing in her backpack. I watched her chest rise and fall, and for a brief moment I was just a mother looking at her child, wishing I could shield her from the world. But there was no more time for wishing. We had work to do. I quietly slipped out of the tent and took a look around. The fire had died down overnight, but a few embers still glowed beneath the ash. I carefully fed it twigs and dry leaves until it flared back to life, grateful that at least one thing was still in my control. When Lily emerged a few minutes later, rubbing her eyes and looking around warily, I greeted her with as much cheer as I could muster. "Good morning, partner," I said. "You ready for our first real mission?" She nodded slowly. "Water." "That's right," I said. "We passed a stream on the way to the waterfall yesterday, remember?" Her eyes lit up a little. "Yeah, I think I remember how to get back." Using the compass Aaron had given her before we left, funny how that had seemed like a sweet gesture at the time, we retraced our steps, tying strips of fabric from my spare t-shirt to tree branches as markers. It took us almost half an hour, but we found the stream. It wasn't deep, but the water was cold and clear, tumbling over smooth stones with a sound that almost made me forget where we were. We filled our 2 bottles and washed our faces. I taught Lily how to collect water without stirring up sediment, something I remembered from a wilderness safety video I watched years ago. She mimicked my movements like a little mirror. When we got back to camp, I used our metal pot to boil the water over the fire. It took longer than expected, and the smoke stung my eyes, but when we finally poured the now safe water back into the bottles, I felt a flicker of pride. "We did it," I said, handing one to Lily. "Safe drinking water." She took a sip and smiled. "We're like survival experts now." I laughed even though it caught in my throat. "Not yet, but we're learning fast." Next came food. The bin had a few sealed protein bars, some jerky, and a small bag of trail mix. I'd estimated it would last us 3, maybe 4 days if we rationed strictly. That meant we needed alternatives. Fast. "Do you remember seeing those bushes by the lake yesterday?" I asked. Lily nodded. "With the little blueberries. Let's go check them out." We walked carefully, scanning the ground and listening for movement. When we found the bushes, I examined the berries closely. Small, round, deep blue with that faint, dusty coating. "They look like blueberries," I murmured. "They are," Lily said confidently. "We learned about them in science class. Wild blueberries. They're safe." Still, I didn't take her word alone. I tested one on my tongue, bitter but familiar, and then ate a few more. I watched Lily closely, waiting for any reaction. Nothing. Just that look of pride kids get when they know something their parent doesn't. We filled a pouch with as many as we could and brought them back to camp. Later we tried fishing. Without rods or line, I sharpened a long stick into a crude spear and spent over an hour standing silently at the water's edge trying to stab at shadows. I failed miserably, splashed more than hunted. Lily suggested we try building a trap instead. Her idea, her initiative, and it was good. We wove thin branches into a rough cone, lined it with more berries, and submerged it where the stream narrowed. It wasn't elegant, but it was something. That night we ate berries, jerky, and a sliver of protein bar. As we sat around the fire, Lily leaned into me. "I'm not scared," she whispered. "Not when you're here." And just like that, I felt stronger than I had all day. Because this wasn't just about me surviving. It was about her trusting me to survive for both of us. The third morning began with a cold drizzle and a creeping sense of dread I couldn't shake. The wind had picked up overnight, snapping the tent walls and carrying in the scent of damp pine and wet earth. My ankle throbbed a lingering ache from stepping wrong the day before, but I brushed it off. We had made it through 2 nights. That had to count for something. Lily was still asleep when I stepped outside. Her face was pale, her forehead damp. I touched her skin lightly and felt the unmistakable heat of a fever. My stomach turned. She stirred beneath my hand. I don't feel good, Mom. My heart cracked. I know, baby. Just rest. I'll take care of everything. I wasn't a doctor. I didn't have any medicine. I didn't even have enough clean water to keep her hydrated if her fever spiked. For the first time since we'd been left behind, I felt true panic settle in. We had passed the point of survival games. This wasn't about strength or resourcefulness anymore. This was about Lily's health, and I didn't have what I needed to protect her. I forced myself to focus. I boiled more water, rationed it carefully. I cooled her forehead with a damp bandana. I whispered stories to keep her calm. Still, her breathing was shallow and her body trembled in waves. That afternoon, the rain turned into a full-blown storm. The tent couldn't hold. Water pooled inside, soaking our sleeping bags. The wind bent the thin frame, snapping one pole and sending it collapsing onto us. I scrambled to hold it up with a branch, but the ground had turned to mud. Everything was wet. Everything was cold. In the chaos of trying to resecure the tent, I stepped backward and pain exploded through my right leg. I cried out and fell, landing hard. My vision blurred. My ankle. God, my ankle. Mom, Lily called weakly from inside the tent. I clenched my jaw, trying not to scream. The pain was white-hot and blinding, but I forced myself upright. My ankle was swelling fast. I couldn't put weight on it. This was the turning point. We couldn't survive like this. Not anymore. Lily, feverish and frightened, tried to sit up. Mom, are we gonna die out here? No, I said immediately, the word escaping like a roar. No, Lily, we're not. I couldn't show her fear even if it was boiling inside me. I pulled myself to a fallen log near the fire pit and sat down hard, trying to breathe through the agony. We're getting out, I told her. I don't care what it takes. To my amazement, she nodded like she believed me more than I believed myself. What do we do? I looked at her, my 10-year-old girl who had endured hunger, cold, fever, and fear, and still sat upright, ready to help. You remember that survival show we used to watch with Dad? I asked. Of course. We're going to use everything we learned. And then some. I wrapped my ankle as best I could using a strip of my shirt and tied it tight. Lily helped prop me up with a makeshift crutch, a branch I shaved with my knife. She even dragged firewood back to camp while I gave her directions. She was determined. Too determined. She shouldn't have had to be. By nightfall, I'd managed to stabilize the tent enough for us to crawl back inside. The fire was low but steady. Lily lay next to me, cheeks flushed and skin burning. I stroked her hair and hummed softly. She reached for my hand. I'm scared. I know, sweetie. Me too. There was no shame in admitting it anymore. Fear wasn't weakness. It was proof we were still fighting. As she drifted into sleep, her hand still gripping mine, I stared at the torn roof of our tent and thought of my parents. They thought they'd left us broken, but they had no idea who we really were. And by morning we'd start moving. We had to. By sunrise on the fourth day, I had made up my mind. We couldn't stay another night here, not with Lily's fever worsening and not with my ankle swelling by the hour. Every instinct screamed at me, go, now. Move before it's too late. I hadn't slept. Every noise in the dark had kept me awake. Animals rustling nearby, the crack of distant branches, the low hum of wind that sometimes sounded like voices I didn't want to hear. Lily was curled up next to me, her breathing shallow. Her skin was still warm, though not as alarmingly hot as the night before. I gently touched her forehead. Maybe the fever was breaking, or maybe it was just the body giving up. I wasn't willing to gamble. I stepped out into the clearing and felt the morning chill bite into my damp clothes. My ankle throbbed fiercely, but it held my weight. Barely. I thought back to the drive into this place. My father had said something offhandedly, casually, about a ranger station near the main trailhead. He'd even mentioned a side road branching off toward it. I hadn't paid attention at the time. But now that fragment of conversation might be our only way out. I returned to the tent and gently woke Lily. Baby, I whispered, brushing her hair back, we're going to get out of here today. You and me. We're going to find help. She blinked at me, her lips dry and cracked. Can you walk? I'll manage, I said with a smile I didn't feel. But I need you to try too. Just a little. I'll carry you if I have to. She nodded, brave as ever, and started pulling on her socks with shaky fingers. We packed quickly, grabbing the last usable supplies, a bottle of boiled water, a few handfuls of berries, the flashlight, and her compass. I tore the remains of the tent into strips, tying them to a thick branch and making a makeshift drag sling in case she couldn't walk further. "Which way, Mom?" she asked. I closed my eyes and imagined the layout, the way the cars were parked, the direction of the sun. My father's voice, ranger stations down past the old access road. I pointed east. That way. We set out into the forest, each step a searing scream up my leg. I leaned on the walking stick I'd fashioned from a branch the day before, my hands trembling from pain and exhaustion. Lily walked beside me in silence, her strength flagging fast. Within an hour she collapsed. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I can't go anymore." I didn't hesitate. I laid out the drag sling, helped her lie down, and began pulling her through the underbrush, inch by painful inch. Roots caught at my feet. My ankle nearly gave out twice. I gritted my teeth and pushed harder, focusing only on the next step, the next patch of sunlight breaking through the canopy. "You're the strongest person I know," Lily murmured behind me. I nearly broke, but I kept moving. We made it past a cluster of boulders, a fallen tree, and into what looked like a more defined trail. A real trail. A sign we weren't entirely alone in this wilderness. Then I saw it. A post. Wooden, weathered, and barely visible beneath the moss, but there, standing tall in the undergrowth. A trail marker. I dropped to my knees in front of it, gasping for air. "We found it," I whispered. Lily stirred. "Does that mean we're saved?" "It means we're close. Closer than we've ever been." We rested in place, sipping the last of our water, then followed the trail, me hobbling and Lily trying to walk when she could. Birds flitted through the trees. Somewhere nearby, a stream babbled. Then Lily stopped. "Mom," she said, voice low. "I hear voices." I froze, holding my breath. And then I heard them too. Faint, distant, but undeniably human. "Hello," I called out, my voice hoarse. Silence. "Then hello, who's there?" "Help us," I shouted, "please." Two figures emerged from the trail, bent, a man and a boy. Hikers. Real people. Civilization. Safety. The man's face shifted from surprise to alarm when he saw us. "My God," he said, running toward us. "Are you okay?" I collapsed forward, tears spilling down my cheeks. "Please," I said. "My daughter's sick. We've been lost. My family. They left us." "You're safe now," he said, already pulling out a water bottle and calling for his son to hand us food. "You're safe." And for the first time in days, I let myself believe it might be true. The ranger station was exactly 2 miles down the trail. Just 2 miles between life and death. Between our isolation and the world we'd been torn away from. Marcus, the man who found us, and his son Jason walked with us every step of the way. He supported me under one arm while Jason carried Lily's backpack and offered gentle encouragement to her every few feet. "Just a little more," he said softly. "You're doing great, sweetheart." Lily clung to my side, her strength flickering like a candle in the wind. She didn't complain once. Not when her legs gave out. Not when I had to lean heavily on Marcus just to take another step. Her eyes stayed fixed on the trees ahead, as if willing the ranger station to appear out of thin air. And then, like some rustic mirage, it did. A small wooden building with a green tin roof nestled in a clearing just beyond a ridge. There was a Forest Service vehicle parked beside it, and a tall antenna reaching toward the sky. Smoke curled from the chimney. I almost fell to my knees in relief. "Hey," Marcus called out. "We need help." A woman in a green uniform appeared on the porch, short, stocky, sharp-eyed. She took one look at us and waved us forward, already moving to unlock the door. "Bring them inside," she said. Now. Her name was Ranger Patricia Collins, and she moved like a woman who'd seen things, fires, floods, maybe even worse. She didn't ask questions right away. She got us water, wrapped Lily in a blanket, checked my ankle, and examined Lily with a field medic's precision. "Fever's still there, but she's not in danger yet," she said. She pointed at me, "have a badly sprained ankle, maybe fractured. We're going to get you both to a hospital." When I finally sat down on a worn couch in the ranger station's front room, I felt like every nerve in my body had gone silent. Not from exhaustion, but from shock. Lily was curled beside me, sipping water. Her fever had stabilized. Her color was returning. We were okay. And then the question came. "You mentioned your family left you," Ranger Collins asked. I nodded slowly. "They planned it. They brought us out here and then they disappeared. Left a note. Left us with barely enough to survive. Said it was to teach me a lesson." Her eyes hardened. "That's criminal endangerment, especially with a child involved." I expected her to be skeptical, maybe even judgmental, but she wasn't. She believed me instantly. She picked up the radio and called for medical transport, then another line to contact the sheriff's office. "You're not just lucky to be alive," she said. "You're lucky we found you before this turned into a recovery mission instead of a rescue." Within an hour, a Forest Service rescue unit arrived with an off-road medical vehicle. They gave Lily an IV for hydration, wrapped my ankle, and helped us both into the back. I clung to her hand the entire ride down the mountain. I didn't cry until we reached the hospital. Once we were inside, once I saw nurses swarming to care for Lily, once I heard the words, "She's stable. You're both going to be okay," I finally let it go. The fear, the rage, the pain I'd bottled up to survive. I sat on that hospital bed and sobbed into my hands until my chest ached. It wasn't over. Not by a long shot. But we had crossed the line between danger and safety. That night, after Lily was admitted for overnight observation and I had been fitted with a boot and crutches, the door to my room opened and in walked Sheriff Keith Donovan. He had the face of someone who'd seen the worst in people and still got up every morning to face more. He introduced himself with a nod and a firm handshake. "I've been in law enforcement for 27 years, he said, after I told him everything, "and I've never heard anything like this." I handed him the letters. The one from my father. The one from my mother. I told him about the missing supplies, the abandoned site, the guilt-ridden conditioning they used to control me. I told him everything. He listened, and when I finished he didn't hesitate. "We'll be investigating this thoroughly. If what you're saying checks out, we'll press charges." I wanted to believe it. I wanted to think justice was still possible. But after what I'd endured, I'd stopped trusting systems to protect me. Still, the words gave me something I hadn't felt in days. Hope. 3 days after the hospital admitted us, Sheriff Donovan returned, this time not to ask questions, but to deliver news. "We executed a search warrant on your parents' and your brother's homes," he said, flipping open a notepad. "We found emails, dozens of them, all about the so-called intervention. Plans to isolate you, monitor the weather, survival supply lists, even a calendar entry, pick up Caroline and Lily day 10. I felt my stomach churn. "They weren't going to check on us for 10 days? I asked, stunned. Donovan nodded grimly. "And that's if they followed through. There was also a text chain between your father and brother discussing whether they should let it stretch longer if you didn't come to your senses." My hands clenched into fists. The idea that my own family would not only abandon us but schedule our suffering like some twisted retreat? It was more than cruelty. It was calculated. He continued. "We've arrested all 4 of them. Your parents, your brother Aaron, and his wife Michelle. The DA is pursuing charges: child endangerment, reckless endangerment, attempted involuntary manslaughter. And a restraining order permanent is being issued to protect you and Lily." I was silent for a long moment. Then I asked, "What did they say?" Sheriff Donovan shook his head. "Your dad said it was a lesson that got out of hand. That they never meant to hurt you, just teach you responsibility." I nearly laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was exactly the kind of spin I'd expect from him. It was always about the image, the logic, the justification. "We meant well. You misunderstood." It was for your own good. That night, I watched the local news from our hotel room. The headline read, "Family arrested for deliberately abandoning daughter and grandchild in National Forest." The footage was surreal. My father in handcuffs, my mother with her lips pursed in indignation, Aaron shouting something about misunderstanding as reporters snapped photos. I sat there next to Lily, who was curled under a warm comforter, her cheeks no longer flushed with fever, but flushed with the color of safety. She was drawing trees and stars with crayons the hospital had given her. She looked up at the screen. "Are they going to jail?" "Yes," I said, "they are." She thought for a moment. Do they understand what they did was wrong? I wanted to say yes. I wanted to lie and make it easier for her to believe in fairness. But she deserved better than that. "No, sweetie," I said gently. "They're sorry they got caught. But I don't think they really understand at all." She nodded quietly, and her small hand found mine. The next day, Sheriff Donovan returned with one more message. "Your parents want to see you," he said carefully. "You don't have to say yes. It's completely your choice." I didn't hesitate. "I'll go," I said. "But not for them. For me." The hospital had given them a secure meeting room. I stepped in on crutches, my ankle still recovering, my daughter safe with a nurse down the hall. They sat across the table, my father, his silver hair tousled, his suit wrinkled. My mother clutching her purse like it was a shield. They looked small somehow, deflated. "Caroline," my mother began. "We never meant..." I raised a hand. "Stop." They froze. "You left your daughter and granddaughter in the woods. Alone. With a fever. No cell phone. No guarantee of safety. You could have killed us." "We left supplies," my father said, his voice weak. "You left a tent and granola bars, Dad," I snapped. "This wasn't a survival experiment. This was abuse. And you did it because I didn't obey you." Silence. "You always thought I couldn't survive without you," I continued. "But guess what I did? And not because of anything you taught me, but because of everything you tried to take from me." My mother wiped a tear. "We thought it was the only way to reach you." "Congratulations," I said coldly. "You reached me, but now I see you for who you are." I stood up, ignoring the pain in my ankle. "You're not my family. Family doesn't abandon you. Family doesn't punish you for being independent. Family doesn't leave a 10-year-old child in the forest." And then I left. I didn't look back. I never would. Back at the hotel, the door clicked softly behind me as I returned from that confrontation. I stood in the dim entryway for a moment, breathing deeply, trying to shed the weight of everything I had just said and everything I hadn't. Lily looked up from the bed as I walked in. She had drawn another picture, this one of a mountain trail, a tall pine tree, and a mother and daughter holding hands. There was a son in the corner smiling. "Did you see them?" she asked quietly. I sat beside her and nodded. "I did." She studied my face. "Are they sorry?" I hesitated. "They're sorry they're in trouble," I said truthfully. "But I don't think they really understand what they did to us." Lily nodded slowly, like she already knew. "Grandma told me once that love means doing what's best for someone even if it hurts them. But I don't think that's what love really is." I stared at her for a long moment, amazed at the wisdom in her voice. "You're right," I said. "Real love means listening, respecting someone, standing by them even when you don't agree." What they did wasn't love, Lily. It was control dressed up like concern. She leaned her head on my shoulder. "I like our kind of love better." Tears prickled in my eyes. "Me too." That night was the first time since the ordeal that Lily slept through the night without stirring, without crying out from fever dreams or flinching at distant thunder. I sat up in the armchair by the window, watching the lights of the small Pennsylvania town blink quietly in the dark. We were safe. For now. But safety wasn't the end of the story. There was still healing to do. With the help of a trauma-informed therapist, Dr. Leah Winters, Lily and I began the long journey of piecing ourselves back together. At first, it was small things, acknowledging the fear instead of hiding it, talking about the forest not with horror, but with curiosity and fact. Lily used art. I used writing. We both cried. A lot. Dr. Winters said something to me during one session that stuck. Your parents conditioned you to question your instincts. Every time you hesitated on that trip, every time you doubted yourself, it was a lifetime of their control speaking. But you still protected your daughter. You still made it out. You didn't fail her. You saved her. I cried for an hour after that, but I also began to believe it. As the legal case unfolded, I decided to speak out not just in court, but in the community. The local news story turned national, and suddenly I found myself answering emails from women, from men, from other survivors of toxic family dynamics, who had experienced emotional manipulation masked as love. It was overwhelming, but it was also empowering. I established the Blake Foundation for Family Trauma and Wilderness Safety. Our mission was twofold: offer support to those escaping harmful family systems and provide practical wilderness safety education to families and schools across the country. Lily helped name it. She even drew the logo, 2 pine trees joined at the root, one large and one small. We weren't just healing, we were building something new. 1 year after the abandonment, Lily surprised me during breakfast. "I want to go camping again," she said. I nearly dropped my coffee. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "Not in that forest. Somewhere else. Somewhere safe. I want to take it back." That was her phrase, take it back. Not just reclaim the forest, but reclaim the part of herself that had been hurt, frightened, and nearly broken. So we did it. With proper gear, a guide, and a well-marked trail, we set up camp in Olympic National Park. We built a fire. We roasted marshmallows. We stared at the stars. "How do you feel?" I asked as we sat beside the flames. She smiled, proud, like we beat something. I smiled back. We didn't just beat it. We turned it into something better. And I meant it. The forest had once been the site of our worst betrayal. Now it was the beginning of our truest freedom. Time has a strange way of dulling certain memories: what the air smelled like in the forest, how the ground felt under my knees that first night. But some things stay sharp, like the sound of Lily's fevered breathing in the tent, the look in my mother's eyes when she tried to justify it all, or the burning in my chest the first time I told someone out loud that I no longer had a family. But what surprised me the most in the months after the trial was how much space healing took up. Not just emotionally, but physically. I wasn't just recovering from injury or trauma, I was making room for a version of myself that had never been allowed to exist before. Free. Not the daughter who apologized too often. Not the sister who kept the peace. Not the woman who second-guessed every decision. Just Caroline. A mother. A survivor. A teacher. A builder of something new. Our move to Denver went through, but I changed the neighborhood. Something more secluded, with trees outside the window and a small fenced yard for Lily to grow sunflowers in. The school that had offered me the teaching job didn't rescind it. In fact, when they learned about what happened, they offered to delay my start and provide resources for Lily's transition. I was stunned, not just by their kindness, but by how foreign it felt to be met with compassion instead of judgment. Lily adapted faster than I did. Kids are like that sometimes, resilient in a way that adults forget how to be. She made friends. She joined the science club. She even started writing short stories, some of which involved brave girls in forests who outsmarted monsters disguised as grown-ups. She never wrote about the real story, but I could see it in every line. As for me, I started writing too. At first, it was just journaling. Then it became something bigger. I wrote an article about our experience, then a full-length memoir. When it was published, the response was overwhelming. Letters from strangers, interviews, even a segment on a national morning show. But the best response I ever got came in the form of a handwritten letter from a woman named Joy in Vermont. She said, "Your story gave me the courage to cut ties with my father for the first time in 35 years. I thought family meant endurance. Now I know it can also mean escape." I cried for an hour after reading that. And then I kept writing. Meanwhile, the Blake Foundation continued to grow. We hosted monthly support circles, sent survival kits to women fleeing abusive homes, and worked with school districts to create educational programs about safe camping practices for families. Lily insisted we call one of the initiative's Pine Tree Partners. She was the first to wear the t-shirt with pride. And somehow, amidst the rebuilding, something new blossomed: trust. Not just in others, but in myself. That I could make good choices. That I could protect my daughter. That I didn't need anyone else's approval to define my value. The court system had done its part. My parents and Aaron were serving their sentences. The restraining orders were permanent. And while I sometimes caught myself wondering whether they ever truly understood what they had done, the wondering didn't hold the same weight it used to. They were part of our story. But they were no longer allowed to write in our chapters. On the 2-year anniversary of our abandonment, Lily and I stood together at the summit of Bear Peak, overlooking the stretch of Colorado wilderness that had become our refuge. She held my hand as the wind tugged at our jackets. "Do you still think about them?" she asked. I took a moment before answering. "Sometimes, but less and less." "Do you miss them?" I looked into her eyes, the same eyes that once filled with terror in that broken tent, and shook my head. "No," I said. "I miss the idea of what they could have been. But I don't miss who they really were." She nodded like she understood, because somehow she did. That night we sat by another campfire. This one well-contained, safe, and bright. She reached into her pack and pulled out a bag of marshmallows and 2 long sticks. We sat in silence for a while, letting the fire crackle and the night settle in around us. There was something sacred about it, just the 2 of us surrounded by trees with no ghosts left to chase us. Lily held her marshmallow over the flame, her hand steady, her face lit in amber glow. "You know what's funny?" she said after a long pause. "I used to be afraid of the woods." I turned to look at her. "You had every reason to be." She shrugged. "But now, it doesn't feel scary anymore. It feels like ours." Her words landed hard, deep in the part of me that still carried echoes of that helplessness, the part that still saw shadows in the trees sometimes when I closed my eyes too long. But she was right. This forest, our forest, wasn't haunted. Not anymore. We had taken it back. That camping trip became a tradition. Every spring we'd pack our gear, check our weather app, review safety protocols, and hit the trails, not to prove anything, but to reconnect. With nature, with ourselves, with how far we'd come. And every time it felt a little lighter. One spring evening, 2 years and some months after it all happened, I stood at the front of a community center speaking to a room filled with mothers and daughters. We were hosting the annual Pine Tree Partners Wilderness Workshop, a hands-on session about safety, resilience, and reclaiming power in both the wilderness and the home. Lily, now 12, had just finished teaching a breakout session about how to build a proper campfire. She was beaming, confident, vibrant, unapologetically herself. When it was my turn to speak, I took a breath and began like I always did, not with the dramatic part, but with the quiet truth. The hardest part wasn't being left behind in the forest. It wasn't the hunger or the cold or the bear. The hardest part was realizing that the people I trusted most thought I needed to be broken in order to learn. That love to them meant control. But what they didn't count on, what they never understood, was that my daughter saved me as much as I saved her. We didn't need punishment. We needed belief. In each other. In ourselves. The room was still, and then applause. But it wasn't just for me. It was for the woman who came up after, eyes glassy, whispering, "Your story was mine too." It was for the teenage girl who clutched her mother's hand and said, "Let's go camping together." It was for Lily, who had turned pain into purpose without even realizing it. After the workshop ended, we packed up, loaded our gear into the back of my Subaru, and started the drive home. The sky was pink and orange, that kind of western dusk that made everything feel possible. Lily was quiet in the passenger seat for a while. Then she turned to me. "Do you think they ever think about us?" I knew who she meant. My parents, Aaron, Michelle. I kept my eyes on the road. Maybe. But we're not their story anymore. She nodded like she'd already accepted that long ago. Then she smiled. That's okay. We have better stories now. I smiled back. Yeah, I said. We really do. It wasn't long after that drive home from the workshop that I received an invitation in the mail. Not the kind with lace trim or gold embossing. Just a plain white envelope with no return address. Inside was a single folded card with 2 lines written in that unmistakable handwriting, my father's. We're out. We'd like to talk. For Lily's sake. No apology, no acknowledgement of what had happened, no mention of courtrooms or jail time, just a demand disguised as concern. I didn't show it to Lily. Not because I wanted to keep secrets, but because I didn't want to burden her with their noise. She had earned her peace. I wasn't about to let them steal it again. Instead, I showed it to Dr. Winters during our next session. She read it once, then again, and handed it back to me without a word. What do? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. She leaned forward, eyes gentle but firm. Caroline, you don't owe them anything. Especially not Lily's safety or forgiveness. This isn't a bridge to rebuild. It's one you've already burned, and for good reason. She was right. Still part of me felt the tug of old patterns. That small, scared voice that had been conditioned to believe family means forever, no matter the damage. But louder now, stronger was the voice I'd built over these past few years. The one that said, you are enough. You can choose peace. You can choose your child. So I shredded the letter and threw it away. Lily never even knew it arrived. That weekend, we held a retreat for women and children, survivors of emotional abuse. It was the first overnight campout hosted by the foundation, and I was nervous. Would the kids be okay sleeping under trees again? Would the mothers feel safe enough to relax? But from the moment the tents went up and the first fire was lit, the clearing was filled with laughter stories and something none of us had felt in a long time: trust. Lily helped a younger girl named Marley tie her hiking boots and taught her how to read the compass. I used to be scared of the woods, I heard her say, but I took it back. That phrase again, simple, powerful. We took it back. Later that night, after s'mores and shared stories around the campfire, one of the women, a single mom named Jen, sat beside me, her voice barely above a whisper. My ex-husband used to say I couldn't survive without him, that I'd never make it out there with our son. But watching you and Lily, I think I finally believe I can. I didn't have a profound answer. I just squeezed her hand and said the only thing that felt real. You already did. The retreat became an annual tradition. Every year, new faces joined. Every year, old faces returned stronger. Some brought their daughters. Others brought sons. All of them brought stories. Painful ones, brave ones, healing ones. At the third retreat, Lily stood up during the group's closing circle and said, "You don't need anyone's permission to protect yourself, or to protect the people you love." She was 13. I felt my heart swell so wide it could have cracked the sky. When we drove home that year, she played a song on her playlist, some indie folk track about finding your voice. Halfway through, she turned down the volume. "Do you still wonder if they'll ever really understand what they did?" she asked. Not accusing, just curious. Sometimes I admitted. But then I remember that understanding isn't always necessary for closure. We're not waiting for them to get it. We're already free. She smiled, rolled the window down, and let the wind whip her hair. "Good," she said, "because I don't want them in our story anymore." I laughed. Too late. We've got a better ending. There was something poetic about how our lives started to settle into place after so much chaos, not all at once, but steadily, like spring thawing the last traces of a harsh winter. I didn't notice it at first. It was in the little things, the way Lily no longer flinched when we passed deep woods, or how I could now look at a camping catalog without feeling like my lungs were closing. Healing, I realized, rarely arrives with a trumpet. It tiptoes in quietly disguised as normalcy. One evening, after a long day teaching, I came home to find Lily in the kitchen, humming to herself, making spaghetti from scratch. She looked up at me with a grin. "I'm testing recipes for our next retreat," she said. Think we can convince the others to eat mushrooms? I laughed, leaning on the counter. Only if you don't tell them what's in it until after they love it. She smirked. Deal. Moments like these were becoming the rule, not the exception. And for the first time in years, I was allowing myself to dream forward instead of merely surviving. We began planning a summer series through the foundation, not just safety workshops and support circles, but empowerment retreats. We called them Trailblazers, designed for teen girls and their mothers or guardians. We taught them how to read topographic maps, how to start a fire safely, how to set boundaries both in the wilderness and in life. At our first Trailblazers weekend, we welcomed 12 pairs. Some had fled emotionally abusive families. Others were healing from generational patterns of control and silence. All of them were looking for something I knew intimately: the ability to trust themselves again. Lily led the compass navigation course. She was firm, patient, and had everyone laughing by the end. She's incredible, one mother whispered to me during lunch. She's earned every bit of who she is, I replied. And so had I. That weekend, I shared my story again, not just the highlights, but the messy, painful parts. I told them about the night I sat in a tree holding my feverish child, praying a bear would go away. About the guilt that chased me even after the court verdicts came down. About how much I wanted to believe my parents could change, and how liberating it was to stop needing them to. When I finished, there was silence. Not awkward, sacred. Then one teenage girl, maybe 14, raised her hand. How do you stop feeling bad for protecting yourself? The question hit like a rock to the chest. I took a moment, then said, you stop when you realize that protecting yourself isn't selfish, it's sacred. You stop when you accept that people who love you don't make you shrink to fit their comfort. They stretch to make room for your truth. The girl nodded. So did her mom. Later that night, around the campfire, we passed around a small journal, something we called the survivor log. Every person could write one thing: a declaration, a truth, a promise to themselves. Lily wrote, I don't owe anyone the parts of me they tried to destroy. When she passed it to me, I stared at the page, then wrote, you don't have to earn your right to be safe. It's yours by default. Don't ever let anyone take it again. We closed the book. The fire popped. A light wind rustled the leaves, and I knew we weren't just survivors anymore. We were builders of a new world. Somewhere between the third retreat and Lily's 14th birthday, I stopped checking the news for updates on my parents' release dates. I no longer marked the court calendar or counted the days since the sentencing. Not out of ignorance, but because it no longer defined me. We had outgrown that chapter. But the past, as I'd come to understand, doesn't always stay buried. It shows up in unexpected ways. One rainy October afternoon, I received an email from a documentary producer. She had read my book, followed our foundation's work, and wanted to tell our story, not just the trauma, but the transformation. My goal, she wrote, is to show how women rebuild not in spite of adversity but through it. I stared at the message for nearly an hour. It felt risky. Vulnerable. But something about her tone, the gentleness in her pitch, made me feel seen. I forwarded the email to Lily. Thoughts, I asked. She wrote back 2 words. Let's do it. The documentary took nearly a year to film. They followed us on hikes, at workshops, even during one of our quiet Saturday breakfasts. We revisited the national park, not that forest, but one nearby, and retraced the kind of trip that had once terrified us. At first, speaking into a camera again felt awkward, but slowly I found my voice growing stronger, clearer, not as a victim or even just a survivor, but as a mother who had reclaimed her worth, as a daughter who had broken the chain. One of the most emotional moments came during a filmed fireside talk at the final retreat of that year. The crew asked Lily if she'd like to say anything directly to the camera. She thought for a moment, then looked straight into the lens. If you're watching this and someone made you feel like you weren't enough, like your voice didn't matter, I want you to know they're wrong. You matter. You get to choose who gets to be in your life. You get to write your story. I wiped tears behind my coffee cup. When the documentary aired 6 months later, the response was overwhelming. Letters flooded in from all over the country: women teachers, therapists, teenagers, even men who had experienced emotional coercion in their families. The most powerful note came from a woman in Montana. She wrote, "I've been no contact with my mother for 3 years and still feel guilty every day. Watching your story reminded me that boundaries are not betrayal, they're survival." We invited her to the next retreat. She came, and she brought her daughter. Not long after, we received word that my parents had applied for early release and been denied. The parole board cited lack of demonstrated remorse and ongoing emotional harm to the victim. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I just felt finished. That door had been closed, sealed, and weathered by time, and I had no interest in peeking through it again. To mark the close of the documentary project, we held a community bonfire. Guests brought written fears and old wounds on scraps of paper to throw into the flames, a symbolic letting go. Lily brought one too. Afterward, she wouldn't tell me what it said. "That one was just for me," she whispered. And that was enough, because part of healing is learning when to let others keep their own peace. The fire crackled, marshmallows roasted, laughter echoed through the trees. And in that moment, under a blanket of stars, I finally understood what freedom felt like. It wasn't loud. It was quiet, like safety, like home. As the years passed, Lily and I continued to grow together and individually into people neither of us could have imagined back in that clearing where everything was taken from us. She was in high school now, taller than me by an inch, with confidence that came not from arrogance, but from hard-won self-awareness. She was the kind of young woman I had spent my whole life trying to become. And now I was watching her live it out in real time. One weekend in late spring, she was invited to speak at a youth leadership summit in Seattle, an event for teens across the country who had overcome adversity and wanted to lead change in their communities. I sat in the audience, heart pounding, as she stepped onto the stage in her pressed blazer and hiking boots, because of course, she would combine the two. She didn't read from a script. She didn't need one. "My story starts in the woods," she began. "But it's not about being lost. It's about being found." She talked about fear, about learning to trust her instincts, about watching her mom, me, drag her through the forest while injured, never once letting go. She didn't speak with bitterness or vengeance. She spoke with clarity. We're not responsible for the pain others cause us, but we are responsible for what we build after, and we get to choose whether we build walls or bridges. By the time she stepped off stage, the room was silent. Then it erupted in applause. I couldn't stop crying, not just from pride, but from awe. I had survived for her. But somewhere along the way, she had begun to lead me forward too. After the summit, we walked along the waterfront as the sun set, turning the Seattle sky a deep, bruised purple. Lily kicked a pebble into the water. "Mom," she asked softly, "do you ever wonder how it might have been if they hadn't done it?" I took a long breath. "Sometimes," I admitted, "but I think about it less and less." She nodded. "I don't think I'd want them back. Even if they apologized. Even if they really meant it." I looked at her surprised. "Not even for closure?" She shook her head. "I don't need them to understand. I just need me to understand that I'm allowed to be happy, that I can keep what we built and not feel guilty." God, she was wise. "Me too," I said. "Me too." Back home, we placed a photo from that weekend in the hallway. Lily on stage, mid-sentence, hands out like she was shaping the very air around her. Next to it, we kept a framed trail map from our first successful camping trip. Not to glorify what we went through, but to remind us what we rose from. Every year on the anniversary of our escape, we take a quiet hike. No media, no staff, no foundation talk. Just us. We don't follow a set trail. We pick a new one every year. No two hikes are the same, because we're not the same people anymore. On this year's hike, Lily paused at the summit and said, "You know, I don't think revenge is the point." I turned to her, curious. "No." She smiled. No. I think the point is to outgrow the people who hurt you. Not to hurt them back, but to show that they didn't win. I let the words settle between us like sunshine through pine branches. She was right. They hadn't won. We had, not with anger, not with courtrooms, but with life. With choosing each other again and again every day. It was Lily's 15th birthday when it truly hit me how far we had come. We didn't do anything elaborate, just a small gathering at home with her closest friends, some homemade lemon cake, and a string of twinkle lights draped across our backyard fence. No big decorations, no hired caterers, just laughter music, and the kind of warmth that can't be bought. She didn't ask for gifts that year. Instead, she asked if we could each write down one thing we had taken back in our lives and pin it to a corkboard she'd set up near the patio. At first, the kids were hesitant. But once Lily shared hers, I took back my sense of safety in the world. The rest followed easily. I took back my voice. I took back my self-worth. I took back my joy. By the end of the night, the board was full. Watching those kids, all of them navigating their own complicated lives, share something so personal and empowering, it brought me back to that first clearing where we'd been left with nothing but a 2-person tent and a few granola bars. We had nothing back then. Now we had everything that mattered. After everyone left and the night air turned cooler, Lily and I sat on the back steps barefoot, sipping hot cocoa. "Do you remember how quiet it was the first night in the woods?" she asked. I nodded slowly. It felt like the world had forgotten we existed. She looked out into the dark yard lit only by the faint glow of the kitchen light behind us. "I think that was the loneliest I've ever felt," she said. "But also, the bravest." "You were," I said. "Braver than you ever should have had to be." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "You too." We sat like that for a while, 2 survivors wrapped in the kind of peace we never used to believe was possible. And I thought about all the people who had helped us get here. The rangers, the rescue team, the therapists, the friends, the strangers who turned into supporters, the kids at retreats who shared their fears, the women who dared to leave toxic family systems after hearing our story. This journey was never just ours. It belonged to everyone who had ever been told they were too much, too selfish, too dramatic, too different to be loved, and to everyone who had ever chosen to love themselves anyway. At some point, Lily stood up and disappeared inside. She returned with the corkboard now full of notes and held it up. "Should we keep this?" she asked. I smiled. "We should hang it in the foundation office." She grinned. "A reminder that healing is loud, visible, and shared," I added. As the wind picked up, I pulled the blanket tighter around us and looked up at the stars. We weren't the same people who had entered that forest years ago. We were stronger, clearer, freer, not because we had escaped pain, but because we had faced it and built a life beyond it. Not a perfect life, but a true one. And that, in the end, was the most powerful revenge of all. If you had told me years ago, back when I was standing in a silent forest clearing with my daughter's hand in mine, a note trembling between my fingers and a storm of disbelief crashing through my chest, that one day I would look back, not with bitterness, but with peace, I wouldn't have believed you. But here we are, not untouched, not unscarred, but undeniably whole. I've learned that healing doesn't erase the past. It simply makes space for the present. For the new chapters, for the love that grows not from perfect conditions, but from perseverance and choice. Lily is my greatest testament to that. She is not a survivor because of what was done to her, but because of how she chose to live beyond it. She laughs without apology now. She leads with curiosity. She loves without fear. And she speaks her truth not to punish the past, but to light the way forward for others still stuck in the dark. And me, I no longer need permission to take up space, to speak up, to walk away from those who mistake control for care. I've built a life I'm proud of. Not flashy, not performative, but rooted, real, and resilient. There are still moments when the wind rustling through trees will take me back. Still dreams where I'm in that tent again, heart pounding, waiting for help that might never come. But now I wake up to the sound of Lily's laughter down the hall, to sunlight, to peace. And I remind myself, we weren't just left behind, we were reborn. And we walked out of that forest not just alive, but truly finally free.